This is a bonus clip from a Full and Bloom interview with producer-engineer Ricky DeLena. The exchange was not published in Ricky's original Yngwie Malmsteen Trilogy interview. If you'd like to listen to that interview, click the link in the description. Did you work on Creatures of the Night by Kiss?
Yeah, I did 4 songs on that. I've known Kiss for a long time. I've known those guys from New York, Paul. And I also did an album called Crown of Thorns, I think it was, where Gene and Paul produced with me. I worked on Creatures of the Night. I did War Machine, and I forgot the name of the other songs. It's a long time ago. That was good. Paul and I were friends, so we kind of still are friends, but, I'd known those guys for a while. I was at the record plant in New York when they were doing Kiss Alive.
Oh, wow. What, when they were coming in to do overdubs?
Coming in there to clean up all the live mistakes, yeah.
Right. And was Vinnie Vincent playing on guitar on the Creatures of the Night?
Yes. Driving him crazy. Let me tell you, that was funny. Kisses, when I was working with them, Peter, Chris, and
Ace.
And Ace were no longer in the band, and it was Eric Carr, and Vinnie Vincent. It's Paul and Gene's band. They're the ones who kept all that together and kept it going. So it was their way.
And so what do you mean? Vinny was acting a certain way?
No, Vinny was a good guitar player. He did his things, but he took a lot of direction from those guys. Those guys knew what they wanted, and they sort of directed everything.
I always loved that record, though, man. When I was a kid, I loved Creatures of the Night.
I enjoyed working on it.
So on that Wildside record, when you're recording that album at Eddie Van Halen's studio, do you actually get to hang with him a bit?
Yeah, well, we spent the first few months up at his house, 3 or 4 months up at his house, because Andy had just finished doing For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. He worked with Eddie on that, Van Halen on that album. And when we were doing Wildside, I originally booked A&M Studios to do the tracks because I liked that big live room. So we got some tracks done at A&M. And then Andy said, hey, let's just go up to Eddie's house and do all the overdubs. So I said, all right, that's fine. So we went up to Eddie's house, and, for half that whole album was hanging out with Eddie. Eddie didn't want to stay away from the studio. He just wanted to hang out and drink and be a pest. At first it was interesting, but we had to get a record done. So after 4 months, I said, I'd just get out of here, and we went back to the record plant. I mean, it was great being up there. It was great having Eddie around, and, the guys got to play with Eddie, and, he was okay, but, he was drinking, and, it was just a party scene. And him and Andy, they would just get so drunk, and, somebody has to hold the session together. Wow. Most of my big records I got were because of guys like Andy, just drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels and passing out.
So quite a bit of the Wildside record is done at Eddie's?
Yeah, we did most of the album up at Eddie's house.
That takes like 4 months at Eddie's studio?
Which should have taken 1 month. Eddie comes down, you start hanging out, you start talking, and Eddie says, I want to show you my new guitar I just built, and, and Brent Woods got to play on, I think the serial number was 00002. On Eddie's brand new guitars that he was making.
Oh, wow.
And Eddie said, you want to buy that guitar? $2,000. And I said, Brent, buy that guitar. The fucking serial number's number 2 on it. And he didn't buy it. And you can, if you talk to Brent Woods today, he'll tell you that's the worst mistake he's ever made. Brent Woods is a good guitar player too. Really.
Yeah, a lot of people love that Wildside record. That was like a one of those ones that a lot of people thought should have been bigger, but it kind of came out late in the game. I can't remember offhand, 92 or something?
Yeah, it was everybody was trying to be Guns N' Roses. That's what I mean. A band like Guns N' Roses breaks, everybody wants to be Guns N' Roses. The Led Zeppelin drum sound. Everybody wants to be the next Nirvana. I'm like, just find your own groove. But it was that time. It was that whole Sunset Strip, Guns N' Roses vibe. All the hair metal bands kind of were going towards that rock / grungy Guns N' Roses style. And it was a good record. There were good musicians. Brent was great. Brent played all the guitars on that record. I don't think that there was another guitar player named Benny, I don't know his last name. Anyway, his chops weren't good enough for the studio, so Brent played all the rhythm and all the solos, and Brent is Brent's tuned in too. Now, Brent's a great guitar player, different than Yngwie, not as mechanical or structured as Yngwie, but Brent's good. He's a good guitar player, good solo player. He's a little bit more soulful. I like working with Brent.
When you're recording the album at Eddie's, is he showing you how he recorded his guitars?
Who, Eddie?
Yeah.
Well, being there with Andy and Eddie, we all got to see firsthand. That's how I learned the trick with, going around the cone with the microphone from Eddie.
Oh, okay.
But it's hard to. You're talking about Eddie Van Halen. You're talking about some of these guys that they're one in a million. It's like talking about Michael Jordan or Derek Jeter or Tiger Woods or these guys are one in a million. So it's like, whatever you could pick up, you pick up. But it's not like you're going to sound like them or be them. But you can learn tricks. You learn a little trick from here, a little trick there.
Of course.
Most of the good tricks you learn is from good engineers, not from musicians, but from good engineers. You got a guy like Bob Clearmountain who's got the best ears in the business, the best mixer in the business. Mick Gazowski, same thing, good mixer. So a lot of the stuff, a lot of the good studio stuff you learn from good engineers, actually.
Did you work with Bob at one point?
My brother, I think Bob mixed the Kiss album I did. He mixed Creatures. Bob mixed a couple of things I did. I never got to work with him. My brother Eddie got to work with him on a couple of things, but I never worked with him because we just shipped the stuff off to him in New York and he would mix it. So, okay. Yeah, I was never in the room with Bob, but my brother was. And my brother's picked up some neat little tricks from Bob that you just wouldn't think of. But, sometimes you stumble across something and you go, oh, okay, that's how that's done. And you wouldn't think about it unless you knew about it.
And a lot of times you have to have reached a certain level in your journey to even be able to absorb the information being offered.
Yeah, like anything else, takes time, takes experience. And as you grow up, your outlook is different too. It's like looking back 20 years and go, fuck, I can't believe I wore that. Oh, fuck, I can't believe my hair was like, you know what I mean? It's like,
right.
You every 5 years you can look back and you go through this, you mature change. As you get older, you mature. Certain things are some things are more important, other things are less important. So, things change and you sort of settle into your skin. And that's how it's like in the studio. After you've worked with 20 different artists and you've done it for 20 years, there's a certain comfort factor. And I don't know if it's just, and I'm not saying that you turn into a cocky or, I just think there's a certain comfort factor and a certain way you see things better than. It's like the old saying, I wish I knew then what I know now, and I'd rule the world. And like I said, when you're working with more mature artists, it's more and more you're on the same level. When you're working with new artists coming in and you've spent 20 years maturing and they're coming in to do their first record, there's always going to be a little bit of rub there because they think they're rock stars and you know that they're just little punks.
Is there any moment like a great Andy Johns, Eddie Van Halen story from that you reflect on from time to time that stands out?
Yeah, there's a bunch, but I'm not comfortable. Everybody wants me and my brother to write a book. I'm just not. There's too many, it'd be a great book, but then nobody would talk to me. So I'd have to think about that. Yeah, there's plenty of things. There's plenty of crazy stories, but I don't know. Maybe I have to be drunk to talk to you about shit like that. But there's a million of them. There's a million stories, and some that'll curl your hair. But it's they have to sort of live in infamy because it's not for me. And it's funny, we have this conversation all the time. A lot of us have this conversation all the time. My brother Eddie wants to write, he's writing an autobiography now, and we sometimes sit at the table across from one another and we just start talking about stories, and it's like, oh, fuck, I forgot about that. I said, well, you can't because, these people are still, a lot of them are still alive, and, you got to be careful because, like I said, you get to be very intimate with when you spend a lot of time with people. And then if you keep on doing records with them over the years and years, I spent a lot of time with Rod Stewart. I spent a lot of time with a lot of other bands who I stayed close friends with. So yeah, I mean, it was a decadent time in everyone's life, and decadent things happened, and it's funny stories and crazy stories and unbelievable stories. But Andy and Eddie together were two headstrong people who liked to drink, and that was a dynamic that was interesting to watch, because it was interesting. Andy liked to fight and argue. He loved a good argument and loved to fight. And once he got drunk, look out. And Eddie was at a time in his life when that, drinking and all that, it was just drinking and drugs and all that shit. It was just nuts.